Hello, everyone. Welcome to Topline podcast. Podcast is internet on listen in your phones with knowledge on go-to-market. Very interesting. Asad Zaman, CEO of Sales Talent Agency, AJ Bruno, CEO of QuotaPath, and me, Sam Jacobs, CEO of Pavilion, here with you now. Thank you, West Wishes, for a good week.
Sam, did you miss us? Did you miss us last week, Sam?
I did miss you, and I felt, I'm glad to be back. But I felt, maybe last week was the best episode ever. Maybe there's, it's like, maybe Kyle is Tom Brady and I'm Drew Bledsoe.
Asad was in control of the controls, so we start it, and he's like, "Okay, hits go live," and we're like 5 minutes into it, and he like stops. He's like, "Guys, we are broadcasting on Facebook right now or LinkedIn." We had to restart the whole episode.
It's like I'm using AI. If Tomas is using it 100 times, I'm 50 times. I'm so technically sophisticated. I'm cooking a steak right now.
We couldn't get record to
boomer. Yo, Dad, get off the internet. I love that it's on Facebook. That's the one he chose.
It was so bad, Sam, that we had to exit this riverside and we had to go to another riverside and start from scratch.
Kyle.
Everybody had to hide in the closet for 10 minutes just out of deep shame before you're ready to face the world again.
I showed myself as the services guy on this podcast, like zero technical ability.
Welcome to Topline, the podcast for the best founders, operators, and investors in B2B tech. Every week, AJ Bruno, Asad Zaman, and me, Sam Jacobs, will break down what's important for you to know to be the most well-informed professionals in the market.
Your deal is almost closed, and all that's left is the security review. But when it comes to those lengthy questionnaires, the endless back and forth can often cause deals to stall out, leaving your deal at risk and dollars on the table. With Vanta questionnaire automation, go-to-market teams can complete security reviews up to 5 times faster, helping you close deals in less time than ever. Visit vanta.com/topline to learn more about questionnaire automation.
I'm glad you're back.
Thank you.
Really glad you're back.
That's nice of you to say. I'm glad to see both of you. I can't wait to see both of you. When people listen, we will have just spent time together in New Orleans, but when we're recording, I haven't yet seen you both in person, and hopefully there can be a warm embrace, some physical contact.
It won't be warm outside. It will be warm embrace, but will not be warm outside. It's going to snow tomorrow. There's a blizzard in New Orleans, y'all.
I can't believe that. That's thanks, Biden.
Yeah. Asad hasn't seen the sun
it's your fault.
Asad hasn't seen the sun in 2 months, and he doesn't ever travel, and this is like his one time, and he gets to go.
I swear, I was so excited for decent weather. I was telling Sherry, I was like, you should come with me. Like, there'll be sun in New Orleans. And she's like, no, I'm good here. And then she looks at the weather. She's like, good luck, buddy.
Enjoyable.
Well, how are you guys doing? AJ, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. We had 5 inches of snow here yesterday, and the girls are off today, so they're all out sledding, and I'm stuck inside with you guys. So it's just I'm just kidding.
But your football team won yesterday, and our football teams will be playing each other when on the same day people are listening to this.
I am the only reason I'm an Eagles fan because I'm from Pittsburgh originally, so I'm a true Steelers fan. But I am an Eagles fan this year because of my boy Saquon and the Penn State connection. I've been following him. I somehow I rooted for the Giants for 5 years. It was a tough 5 years to root for the Giants.
A bit of a flip-flopper, AJ.
No, it's just because you follow a player, but he's just so much fun. He's magical.
You do not follow a player. You follow a team, and you become maniacal about it. You can't flip-flop. You just name 3 teams.
I'm from Pittsburgh. I have one team. It's a Pittsburgh
one
Steelers.
Team.
They're tough to watch. There we go. How are you, Sam?
Pretty good. I'm in Virginia with my parents. We, this weekend was the divisional playoffs. So Washington beat Detroit, which was a huge upset, and me and my friends were all celebrating, and I got some good runs in, and I excited to see all of you in person. And generally speaking, feeling pretty good.
This has to be like one of your favorite months of the year, like where a bunch of people jump on a plane, 100+ people, sometimes hundreds, for the big event, land up in a city to learn and hang out with each other for something that you put together. That must be a very satisfying feeling.
It's a nerve-wracking feeling because I want
I
everybody
imagine.
to have a really great experience. So that is a little scary, and I want to make sure that there's great people in the audience, and then people feel like it was a really good use of their time. On the other hand, I've never had a bad event so far with Pavilion. I'm sure other people have constructive feedback, but my experience, generally speaking, is when a bunch of good people get into the same room, regardless of which company's throwing the event, a lot of great things happen, and it's going to be fun. And I'm resolved. The nice thing is that our core, executive and associate memberships, the core of what we do is doing really well. And so this isn't in any way existential. I mean, I want it to be a great event. We've put a lot of effort into it. But there's a blizzard and there's only so much I can control. So absolute worst case, I'll go for some runs on the snowy streets of New Orleans with AJ, hopefully.
Yeah.
I'll be there too. We'll book a massage and spa day at the Four Seasons and just relax if that happens.
Sounds nice. That sounds nice. Well, let's dive into the docket, shall we? Let's talk about some things of interest to our listeners.
So we've got two big topics to chat about today. We're going to start with Carta's 2024 look back on the state of startups. And I was going through this, and there were a few things that I thought were interesting for us to click into. And the first one that really struck me was the increase of down rounds over the last couple of years. Down rounds were significantly higher in 2023 and 2024. About 20% of startups had down rounds compared to 10% if you look at 2019, early 2020. And this makes a lot of sense based on what happened in the macro environment. What I've been thinking about is the fact that public company valuations have always been quite dynamic to market movements, whereas private company valuations remain somewhat static. And there's a lot more negativity around a down round in the private markets compared to when a public market company goes down a little bit. The amount of tension people take is a little bit less over that. And so I'm curious to see if you guys think that this is going to just right size back to, let's say, 10%, which is what it was before the boom took place, and this was more of a macro situation. Or do you think the ecosystem is maturing and getting comfortable with things like down rounds, and that one of the lessons out of this period will be that if a down round is justified, then a down round must happen, and people know how to execute these down rounds internally as companies and founders as well as investors a lot better than before. Sam, any thoughts on that?
I do not think it's like a secular shift. I think it's a function of the market. And I think valuations, once they reset, it's about valuations resetting. And so the perspective on will we have the same percentage of down rounds in 2025 is a point of view on what percent of companies that raised in 2021 and 2022, early 2022, do we think are held on to just that last bit of capital, but needed to raise capital now and didn't go out to market in 2023 or 2024. And my sense, but I think the person that's most attuned actually to this is AJ, so I'll want to hear what he thinks. But my perspective is that we're through the worst parts of it, but I don't really know. So this is really like an important debate, possibly. I don't have any data to support this. My instinct is that we're through the worst parts of it, and that we will just reset to valuations. And if valuations reset, then there should be, on average, the same percentage of. The percentage of down rounds is going to be a point of view on your optimism on the market. And if you're optimistic on market conditions relative to the current state or current valuation environment, then you should expect down rounds to go down. Pre-pandemic, valuations were rising as the market improved with, ZERP and free money. And now that valuations have reset, I would expect it to be the same percentage as it historically has been, and not some significantly higher percentage, because I would imagine. But that's only true if if somebody tells me, if you gave me the stat, Asad, 50% of companies that raised in 2021 will run out of money in 2025. Well, that's different. Then I would expect it to continue. But otherwise, I think my hope is that we're probably through the worst of it. From your business, my business, I would imagine AJ's business, we're out of the gates in January with a really, really strong start. We're already a month ahead of our ARR targets for our plan for 2025, which is really nice. And so I'm enthusiastic, and I think it'll reset. What do you think, AJ?
I think down rounds, quote down rounds, is window dressing to what is really happening, which is recaps. And I think like you say down round because it doesn't sound as scary as what a recap is. I was on a call with my attorney
Can
last
you
week.
define the difference for the audience, AJ?
Well, yeah, for a down round, if you're a founder or if you were an employee and you work at an organization, you down round, you're like, okay, there's some level of change that's happening that's resetting our organization relative to what the market is. And I'm okay. Like it sucks. Maybe like we take some level of penalty, but the investors made the investment, so it's they're doing too. So we took the penalty, and everything carries on, and we still have a promise. Versus what's really happening is more distressed situations with a recap. And a recap is you wipe the common, or you clear out the cap table. Recapitalization would be signifying a new investor comes in but says, you know what, yeah, it's pennies on the dollar. Like there's maybe some warrants or whatever if things go well for you, as because you're operating the business. In fact, we're going to wipe everything previously and start the vesting schedule over for all of you, and you're getting recapped. That is a much scary situation on the surface, but there's a lot of flavors of what that comes through. I was talking with my attorney last week, and I was just like, Ryan, you're like way busier than you typically are for January. You're doing a lot of M&A and fundraising. And he's like, nope, we're doing a lot of wind downs. I am much busier. So he was saying that they're in a situation where they're seeing lots of wind downs. And I just asked, just generally, like anecdotally, what industries. He said some SaaS and tech, but a lot of healthcare, interestingly. So I don't know. That's not an industry that I'm super familiar with, but thinking about it afterwards, there's in a lot of emergency bridge rounds, right? A lot of emergency bridge rounds are typically these recap. And if you think about it, if I'm a investor and I'm looking at a cap table that's had a 6 to 7 year history, and this company's had 3-4 rounds of funding, raised 50 to 60 million dollars, has a 300, 400, 500 million dollar previous valuation preferred, and they're doing 5 million in revenue, maybe 3. Maybe they were invested at 7 and they're doing 6, 15 and they're doing 12. Are you excited about that business?
Yeah.
Is it a real business? Maybe, but is a business that an investor that's like a momentum investor is in backing the founders is coming in? No, those type of investors aren't looking at it.
Do you think it's only when you run out of, like, is it only the moment when the company needs more money? Or do you think, because I guess there's probably redemption rights and there's probably some kind of preferences or terms where if you've been in that long, maybe you can even force some kind of redemption or force some kind of recap.
The interesting thing, Sam, is that a lot of these rounds were done on very clean terms.
Yeah.
And so founders
done on very clean terms.
What's that?
Our round, the Elephant's investment in Pavilion, was done on very clean terms, and
everyone's round. Everyone's rounds were done on clean terms, and so
that's even better than the money from 2021. Was just the fact that people felt so competitive that, like, we don't have redemption rights. Like there's nothing. I mean, and that's why it's so great to be profitable, which is like whatever you think,
control your own destiny.
Yeah, the company's worth today. Like this is why we run the business, because we might believe that it's worth more in the future based on what we can see. But as long as you're profitable, if people disagree, it doesn't really matter.
Well, I have conversations with 3 founders just last week where they're looking for they're trying to raise right now, and they're looking for an exit strategy. And it's going to be tough. And I looked at their pitch decks, and I actually, shared it with a couple. I told them I was going to share it with a couple of my investors, and a couple of them were just like, "This is going to be impossible for them to raise. Do they understand that?" And they run out of money in February. By the way,
tell me the dynamics without revealing the confidentiality. I'm really curious. Impossible to raise. Tell us like
what made
the
it
things
impossible?
that popped out. Yeah.
These are all three of them are not at real scale. So I'll say less than $10 million in revenue. They've all raised between $3 and $10 million themselves, and they are like still pre-product market fit in being around for 4 to 5 years. And on their own, they're interesting tools, but they're really just tools, and they don't have enough proof points to say that there's sustainability around their business model, and frankly, like they should be there. It would be a classic Series A crunch, but it's worse than that, given that they have a demand issue as well in their market. So just really challenging dynamics across the entire business. But a lot of the technology is fairly interesting, but they're small companies, so they can potentially make it last. All three of these organizations.
I have some interesting data on this. So close to 900 startups shut down in 2024 across Carta's ecosystem. Carta covers about 50% of the venture ecosystem. 109 of these companies were organizations that had raised more than 20 million in venture. Shutdowns obviously increased a lot. And something I've been thinking about is soft landings. There would be these acqui-hire type of situations that were a form of soft landings. And when you acqui-hire, you're not acqui-hiring a go-to-market team, essentially. That's not really the attractive part of the acqui-hire. You actually focus on the technical talent. But there's now been a shift in your ability to build product at a higher velocity than before because of AI. And so are companies that excited about acquiring organizations, trying to integrate these tools, and getting a hand on those engineers where they just don't need as many engineers anymore. They have this AI now that can make them more productive. They can probably build that functionality in a fraction of the time that it would take before. And so those type of soft landings are probably far less available today than they were even a year or two ago. Sam, when you hear that thesis, does it sound directionally correct?
I've learned to never strenuously disagree with you, Asad, because you're no. Honestly, that sounds directionally correct to me. It's always quite interesting to me, actually. Sometimes the market that does exist for distressed assets, I'm always somewhat surprised that certain things can find
I agree.
a home that from my perspective. And there's a company right now that was acquired by another company where we were partners with that company, and I invested, and there's nothing. Everything's wiped out. But I'm surprised it found a home at all. I'm surprised there weren't more shutdowns. So, yeah, I definitely think there's more of a market than you think. This is why advisors exist. This is why investment bankers exist, because it's a big world out there, and there's lots and lots of people. But I agree with you.
I've taken a position in investment banking stocks for this reason. I think this year is going to be active for them on both sides. There's going to be
who have you taken a position in?
I'll share it with you afterwards.
Okay.
There's two firms that I bought a bit into, but I think there's going to be more M&A. There's going to be IPOs, and then there's going to be these soft landing shutdowns, those type of things. Obviously, shutdowns are not their realm, but the rest is. And these stocks there were a couple of them that were up 90% and 60% last year. And there should be more momentum in that space this year. So it is interesting what's happening over there.
Let me ask a question, especially for AJ, but Asad, I'm curious for you too. Let me create a situation here. You're one of these people that AJ's talked to last week. And let's say that of the money they raised, you said they've each raised like $10 million, AJ?
Some have only raised like $1 million or $2 million, but between $2 and $10 million.
Okay, let's say, because the number is less interesting to me than let's say of the two that they raised, let's say 500,000, maybe 300,000, maybe $1 million was from close friends and family, people where they made a commitment to their network. I'm going to make money on this thing. I'm not going to let this thing die. And they look at the reality of the situation and the facts on the ground, and they say, I don't know that I can't do it. I don't see a path forward. We're trying to raise money. How would you handle that? Because I think that's the mental toll. Listen, if everything was institutional capital and you were already rich and all the people you raised from were rich, that's very different than if there's a founder or entrepreneur where their families took a bet on them. Maybe they're middle class families and they're like, here's $50,000 from our nest egg. We only have 200 grand in it or 100 grand in it, but we want you to have it. I just feel like, I guess we do talk about it sometimes, but that feels like there needs to be tools for people to handle that situation, because I can imagine it being a true personal existential crisis about who am I in the world? What have I done? Have I let everybody down? I can imagine it being very, very, very hard.
Yeah. I think that these are all first-time founders too. So especially for first-time founders, if I let down my own family, well, that's just more of the same. I've been doing that for decades. So whatever. They're used to it. But you have first-time founders that are not that emotional tie to letting, like, their grandmother gave. My grandmother was the first check into Trendkite. She gave us $6,000.
Wow.
Yeah, $6,000 to do design, and we got the site and the first version of Trendkite up and running with that.
And AJ, what was 6,000 to her? Like,
it was well. First off, I left the Tony Robbins conference saying I was going to go. It was basically a concert. There's a lot of jumping up and down and yelling. Saying I was going to start this company, and no one thought this was a good idea. And my grandmother and my mom were like super adamant that I do not do this. But I kind of forced it, and so my grandmother sent me a check one day when I was in San Diego. I remember opening it. It was a $6,000 check, and it just had a one line on it. Said, said, I don't think this is a good idea, but I believe in you. Go follow your dreams.
that's so sweet.
And so here's what, and then this is kind of cool. So I took that $6,000. No, she passed away in 2019. 2019.
Rest in peace. What was her name?
Lois Atkins.
Lois Atkins
was my grandmother's
thinking
name.
of you, Lois.
So she, so when Trendkite got bought, she was still alive in 2018, and I took that check to her, what she made from it. So she took $6,000 and turned it into $24,000.
Let's go.
And I took that check to her and I said, "Here, Grandma," and she said, "No, go start it with your next company." And so that $24,000 I rolled into QuotaPath. But those conversations I remember having with my family and anyone that invested, and saying like, wow, like this, they really are betting on me. So if I'm in the shoes of any other founder that has friends and family rounds, that's where you start. Every single one of these, I'm sure, has a friends and family round.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of angel investors that are like me that know the deal. And there's plenty of aunts and uncles that don't know the deal and are probably bring that up in Thanksgiving or whatever during holidays. And I can imagine that that's going to be pretty tough this year for a lot of those founders. And that existential crisis, Sam, that you mentioned, I think you're right. What do you guys, do you guys see this as well as being a challenge?
So much. Like, I think the shame that a person has with a failure of that size, just based on the fact that I tried to build value in this world and it didn't work out, there's shame that leads to this feeling of despair that comes from that. And now you're adding on that you've let down people that really took a bet on you, and it will hurt them to some extent, right? Like, as Sam said, it might be 50,000 out of a $200,000 nest egg that they have. And so that's meaningful. And so I think people, it hurts a lot. Maybe this is one of the reasons why second time founders have some type of an edge when they go back into the market, because I think, yes, they learned from like building the business and all the lessons that come from that. But I also think there's like this deeper, feeling that they have that orients them the right way, that becomes a good filter for them when they're picking the idea, that forces them to maybe think more clearly and realistically about what they're trying to build. And so there is a lot of the success rate of second time founders is always remarkable. And it's not necessarily after a first time success. And I have a feeling this has something to do with it. I don't have any data on this, but I have a feeling that this orients people in the right direction, but I also think there's probably a lot of people who spend a very long time in a very dark place because of this particular element of the equation.
Sam, do you have, before the elephant round, did you have a friends and family round that you did, or was that your?
No.
Sam hadn't raised any money.
Yeah, I mean, we were. I was in this very, very fortunate. See, this is all about how do you view your life, right? Like, fired constantly from my jobs. Somehow I'm saying, like, I was in a fortunate position.
Lucky me.
Yeah, lucky me. But I started it on the side when I was working at a different company. And
Yeah.
so we built up a revenue base. And then when I was fired in 2018, I had negotiated a very large severance package. And so when they paid me the severance package, that was basically a seed round into the company. And that enabled me to get, where we got to without having to raise any money. And then we were profitable.
And your raise was also very, well, in today's world, unconventional. Like, there wasn't a formal process, a formal deck. I think you just sent your P&L or something, bank statements.
That is correct. I got and I almost didn't respond to the email, and then I did, and I got on the phone, and they said, well, we can give you a read on valuation. I've told this story before, and I had just met with my friend Hugh, who is still a close friend, and he said, well, it's a services business. You might get 1 to 1.2 times revenue. And I was like, Hugh, we grew 4x last year. Like, I don't think you get 1 times revenue if you're growing at that rate. So I wanted to prove Hugh wrong, and so I sent them my financials. And they said, can you send these to me by quarter? Because they were looking for quarterly growth rates. And then I said, sure. And so I sent them. I never had a deck at all. Yeah. Then I got on the phone and they made me an offer. And I shopped it for 2 minutes. Basically, I had a couple meetings with other investors. I met with Leaf Excel from Edition. And it all came down to well, what does a good outcome look like? And Elephant's like, listen, if you can get 3x our money, we're happy. And Leaf Excel was like, listen, just the way my math works for my fund, if it can't be worth $1 billion, it's probably not that interesting. And so I took Elephant's money. I never had a presentation, never had a deck, never did any structured outreach.
Did you meet them in person?
Never met them in person because it was at the tail end of COVID. It was early 2021, so we had vaccines and stuff, but we weren't meeting in person. And it was pretty wild.
Jeez. It was a founders market. Like, that's a founders market type of round, similar to AJ's round. Something interesting about your journey, Sam, has been that you're a solo founder, right?
Yeah.
And there's something interesting happening with solo founders. So in solo founders now,
expert transition. Asad.
It wasn't stylish, right?
Yeah, it was great.
I was also like,
so good. Yeah. Imagine if Asad wasn't going to be here today. Imagine if it was just Sam and I. What in the world were we going to get today?
Just passive aggressive barbs back and forth. Delivered out of love.
The reality is, you would have seen this story arc where it started passive aggressive, and then we would just start being aggressive directly at each other. And Topline, as we know it, would have just completely fallen apart. Thank you.
I said, good day, sir.
Good day. So solo founders now make up 36% of founders in 2024. And so this has been rising at quite a steady rate since 2017. In 2017, only 17% of founders were solo founders. There has been a significant decline over those same years in teams of 3 to 5 founders, and transition to more solo founders. I have a feeling AI has a little bit to do with this as well. But how do you view this, Sam? Like, what do you think is driving this shift? Is it AI? Is it more than AI? And do you see this persisting into the future that we're heading into?
I was always confused by 3 to 5 co-founders. Obviously, in many situations, there really was one driving force, and even though people might have had a co-founder title, they didn't. It's not like they split the equity 4 or 5 ways. But in this cases where they did, I just didn't get it, because it's just, for all of the work and all of the strain and all of the sweat that you're going to do to get such a thin slice, and that's before any dilution. They always, something that always resonated with me was the biggest dilution you'll ever take is the day you take a co-founder. you go from 100% to 50%. And so I also think it's just personality type. I do think it has something to do with AI, something to do with the cost of building tools, something to do with how easy. I mean, it 100% does, right? Because Greg Portnoy at Euler, the partnership platform, I think he built that on Bubble. I think is what it's called. There's all
good friend of mine coming to CEO Summit.
Oh, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
And so but refuses to be the San Diego chapter head. So we have,
he is so busy, this guy.
It's not okay. I asked him, he said no. When I tap you on the shoulder, you say yes.
You say yes.
So I do think it's most of the time co-founders are non-technical people looking for. I mean, that was the joke. The great joke. My favorite joke was Mike Mallon, the product guy who's now building his own business. But he would always say non-technical people starting a company and saying, "Do you know of any?" Starting a software company and saying, "Do you know of any great engineers?" He's always said, "Imagine running around the city saying, I'm going to start the best restaurant, the best food you've ever tasted. Do you happen to know any chefs?" It's like, I don't know how to cook.
Great,
but I'm telling you, it's so good. It's so good. So yeah, I think with easy no code, low code tools, I think it's a lot easier for people to be solo founders. And I think there's a lot of the personality type of, I'm just not I don't want a co-founder. That's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this, and you could call it a lifestyle business or a personality style business, whatever you want to call it. But I'm not. AJ, I get the sense, likes collaboration. He likes being part of a team. He does. I think he does. You can disagree. And this is not a pejorative, by the way. This is just personality type.
We always say out of the three of us, AJ is classically the best CEO.
Well, wait a second. Hold on. I don't know if I'm the best CEO, but I definitely appreciate how much we balance each other on the show. Go on, Sam. I don't disagree with this. I'm like full.
You like all the stuff around running a team.
Where Sam and I do not like.
Asad are like, if I, it's like I like you guys. I like doing this.
Here's what I've had this crisis, the existential crisis on. I agree. I love having co-founders, but some level of it is like a security blanket for me. I've come to the realization that I've had this limiting belief where I haven't, for at least the last two. I don't know if I'll do a third, but if I do a third, I probably will solo found it. Not because I haven't had great success with co-founders. I love working with Eric and Cole, and Matt Allison, my co-founder at Trendkite, and we had a third one that only lasted a year as a technical co-founder. But
we don't say his name.
Patrick Brennan. There we go. I said it. Ugh. I say it. I'll say it because it's Matt Allison's uncle, and that's a whole different story and can of worms that we aren't.
Do we like this guy, Patrick, or we don't like him?
Patrick, no, he's a nice guy. He's a really, really nice guy. He has 5 kids, lives in state college.
Is he?
Huh?
Is he a nice guy?
He is a nice guy.
Is he though?
He's too nice of a guy.
He's too nice. That's the same as not nice.
Anyway, we interrupted you.
Here's the thing. I've thought a lot about this. I love having the sounding board. I love having the collaboration, but it comes at a cost. There was definitely trade-off. You mentioned the dilution, Sam. That's one part of it. One of my favorite books, Founder's Dilemma, talks a lot about this trade-off. It was control versus wealth, right? If you solo found wealth, solo found is control. Multiple founders is going down the wealth bucket because you're bringing in specialization for other areas into it. So my take on this is that I think for the first 0 to 10, we'll call it whatever that means, 0 to 10 million, 0 to 10 stage, whatever, having co-founders is amazing. After you reach a certain stage, it becomes very challenging depending on scale.
And is that because not everyone can be the CEO, meaning the rest are functional leaders, and at some point they hit a cap in their ability to lead that function well?
Companies are not democracies, and they shouldn't be. There's no great companies led by committees.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. And that becomes a challenge when you get to a certain scale of like, you've had these people that have been around that have a ton of respect and institutional knowledge in the organization, may lead still functional, but like the experience and skill set is different and doesn't match. And you as a CEO, you are also having to evaluate your skill set and whether you are scaling with the business. And then now imagine that you're trying to pull other people along. If you're doing that, you're not being a good CEO. And that's the problem. That's the inherent problem. You can't take a co-founder title away from anyone. We're not asking for that. But you are thinking about what is the best position for each person in my company to be in, and co-founders have to be a part of that in a healthy way. And it's a very challenging
very
part.
emotional.
It's a very emotional, very challenging. But I think Sam, I want to hear from you on this as well, because I've also heard from solo founders. It's a very lonely road. Sometimes it feels like there's no one.
I have a take on this.
And yeah, so hear from both of you. From a CEO perspective, we know that's a lonely road. But like as a co-founder, I can at least, I have a founder Slack channel, so I can go in there and vent and complain. And that makes me feel like it's an outlet and a sounding board. But at the same time, there's a lot of things where I'm like, I can't tell anyone about this. This is so frustrating. I want to talk about this, but this is literally, I cannot broadcast this whatsoever right now, because I need to process it and then form an opinion, and not feel like I'm going to someone without that formed opinion and point of view. It's, hey, I'm coming to you. The decision's been made. I want to hear your feedback. But again, we're going to leave this room and the decision's been made already.
Firstly, hot take. I think some of the biggest losers in the ecosystem are people who join a company a year and a half after it's been started, or a year after it's started, and they fight for a co-founder title. That irks me so much. That is not a co-founder.
How do I
Like, you either are
Can we start
part
a
of the
company? Can we start a company, Asad, predicated on that take? Because I am in such violent agreement with you, and the only thing we will ever be co-founders on is the fact that you can't negotiate for the co-founder title.
You just can't. That is not a negotiation point.
What about founding sales team member? Can't you negotiate for that title?
Sure. Like, I was the first.
Like that better.
Sarcastic. I hate that title.
Oh, you hate it? I like that. I like
founding sales team member. That's a joke. Come on.
I think if the company takes off, then it helps your career arc a lot to be like, hey, I was part of that early crew. If what you're trying to go after is something that mirrors the arc that company went on, that doesn't irk me the same way. But negotiating a co-founder title irks me. I genuinely think that it is such a weird, strange thing to negotiate for. It is not. It's just not a thing.
Because I know these people don't listen to this podcast, so it won't really matter. I mean, if it ever rippled out, I don't even remember the woman's name, but she was the woman. She started, what were those shopping websites called? One of them was on Gossip Girl. AJ, do you remember?
It was like AJ, you watched Gossip Girl.
No, it was like they had this placement. Anyway, it was like this big company. I remember, God, I have so many stories. One of the guys that I met, this like famous investor who's such a douchebag, he's like, you know what my strategy is? I only invest in the 10X companies. You know, it was just like this guy.
I only bet on winners.
Was it XOXO Shop Your TV or Fanatics?
No, it was like an online discount. You could buy luxury stuff. Was it called like Swirl? Anyway, I'll look it up when one of you is talking, and when I normally am not listening anyway. And but
Today's business landscape is full of uncertainty, and succeeding as a go-to-market leader has never been more challenging. Pavilion is here to provide you with the education, support, and resources you need to grow, learn, and unlock your full potential. Join more than 10,000 of the world's leading go-to-market executives in a private membership community designed specifically to fuel your success. Visit joinpavilion.com and use the code TOPLINE20 to get 20% off your membership. That's joinpavilion.com, and the code is TOPLINE20 to get 20% off your Pavilion membership. And now, back to the show.
Oh my God, I do remember the founder's name. Her name was, anyway, I'm going to say it. Alexandra Wilkerson, or Alexandra Wilkerson. I forget what her name was, but that's her name. That is her name. I forget the company, so we can Google it and figure out what she was co-founder of. But so then there was this other company called Glam Squad, which was like a company originally that was like, it's like Uber for hairstyling. And it was like briefly in vogue, where one of the things that we can talk about, these marketplace businesses that try to harness the power of like low-cost labor don't understand is that low-cost labor is very hard to harness because those people do not want to be part of your platform.
Yeah.
So like they wouldn't show up for appointments and stuff. But the point is the company had been around for a long time, and they brought her in as CEO, and she made negotiating for the co-founder title like a critical part of her negotiation. And this wasn't like a year and a half pre-revenue. This was like
9 years.
Yeah, exactly. It was just so anyway, I couldn't agree
That's
with
literally
you.
the equivalent of me negotiating co-founder with STA when I became CEO 10 years
Oh my
ago.
God, I could see that it would be exactly the same thing.
It would be literally the same thing.
Listen, I helped build this company. I feel like really, I mean,
this
was
is
there
now when we're really taking off.
Yeah, exactly. Was there really an STA before me? And Jamie's like, yes, there was. There absolutely was. Was there
Pretty much
really?
I think so. Going on to the solo founder thing, I think AJ, what you said about sounding boards is one of the big reasons why people wanted it. It's very lonely to be a solo founder when you're starting a technology company. You need, and sometimes you are specialized in a particular skill set, and you want people that have something else. So you're a technical person, you want the business co-founder, and so I find two people founding teams viable, whereas the 3, 4, 5 is weird to me. But I think this is where AI actually has an impact into the future, because I think that sounding board becomes AI now, right? Like if you go on to like a deep reasoning model.
I was totally going to say exactly the same thing, Asad.
Yeah, like you turn on voice mode and you have that conversation, you have a better sounding board than most likely your co-founder. And if you are looking to like let out something, you have your life partner probably, and then you have AI as well, right? And that is a place where you can make it so that it doesn't record the history of that particular conversation and it goes away. Like it doesn't sit in anyone's head. It doesn't get shared around. And I think also I read something fascinating over the weekend, which is a company that churned off of Figma recently. And why did they churn off Figma? They churned off Figma because they use Figma for prototyping. And why do you use Figma for prototyping? Because it's so hard to build something. It's so hard to build a prototype. It takes so much time and energy and effort. So you try to like get as close to a nice idea on Figma, and then you start building the bones of it out. But now, because it's getting so much easier to just build things, people have churned off Figma and gone straight into Replit to build a prototype. Replit would add some prototyping.
Did we talk to the same company, Asad?
I don't know, maybe. Or maybe this is just a bigger trend.
I met a company in Ireland doing
we're just outing things. So go ahead and say it. Just say it right now.
No. I'm just completely in violent agreement with Asad. Like I met somebody in Ireland in Dublin that was they're like drag and drop your your PDF into like our app, and we'll just build the app. Like we don't need Figma to mock it up.
Look at that, right? And so now I think this is reducing the friction, energy, time, and cost of building things, which I think makes it easier for a solo founder to go down on that journey. You get the sounding board through AI, you get the emotional support through AI. Building has become easier and faster and cheaper. And I think if we were to make a prediction, it wouldn't be wild to see this 36% get really close to 50% in the next 24 months. So 50% of startups, solo founders.
Well, also, if you think about where founders meet each other, I mean, at least for me, I worked with my previous two co-founders, and we were working in the same room night and day, 12 hours a day for years on end. We got to know each other super well. Today's world, that's actually a rare way. It's a rare existence. You just don't have that situation. So if I'm like going to go co-found a company and I've been working in an office space by myself and just like, or my own home, working it from home, I don't even know who I would work with. Like
I'm thinking about this now. I mean, this is why they talk about, the first one single person employee. Like there'll be contractors at that company for the first $1 billion company with only one employee. I think AJ, like the first person you hire is like an EA, like a technical EA. The first person you hire is someone to do, and it's like they get some pro version of ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever, and you're like, go figure out how to build this app, and I'm gonna like do a bunch of customer meetings.
Yeah, go get in Delaware SQL entity and figure that out.
And
And the cost of this will be wild. Sam, you and I spoke to Josh Drutman the other day. Josh has raised a pre-seed round. Usually you're spending a lot of that round to build your product. For the cost of one engineer in North America, he has hired 5 engineers in Brazil or Colombia or something. And he was able to get to version 1 before even closing the pre-seed round, because he was deploying the capital as he was raising bits and pieces of it. So by the time he closed the round, he already had an early prototype that he's putting into the market. This is very different to how companies got built before. The cost structure is different. The speed is different. It's really interesting.
It's like for creative people and people like the three of us and other, entrepreneurial types but particularly sort of individualistic people. AI is like the infrastructure. It's exactly what you said, Asad. It's like, even this past week, right? So this past week, I had this personal situation. I heard from this person that I hadn't talked to in a long time. And they basically I said, "Hey, have you heard this news about me?" And they were like, "Yeah, you told me over drinks." And I looked at the drinks calendar with the news and it didn't match up. And it was clear that other things were happening and certain people were talking about me behind my back. And I felt really weird about it. And I don't have my coach and I don't have my shrink on 24-hour speed dial. So I use ChatGPT and I'm like, "Hey, here's the situation. What do you think?" And the feedback was perfect. It was so helpful and it was so kind. And it was like, give yourself a break. This happens. It's not a reflection on you. And, figure out if you want to because I was like, should I say something? The fact that I know that this person is lying. And it's like, well, what are you trying to get out of it? If you're trying to move forward, it's probably best to focus on your future. And it was really helpful. And I just can see and long story, long-winded rambling aside, but the point is the future is the fullest expression of ourselves through the enhancement of technology, and again, in a way that employees or co-founders, those roles, because again, the biggest argument that people make for co-founders is who's your sounding board, who's going to tell you that you're full of poop, when you have a stupid idea, who's going to be the person that helps you pursue the truth and is completely aligned with you and isn't doing it out of ego. And I can't think of anything less literally egotistical than AI. And I still think, to the point of what we talked about, I forget with who Asad, but I still think creativity actually does come from bouncing into other people and from some kind of collaborations like this. I just don't know that needs to be in a corporate structure in the same way that it used to be. The corporate structure's purpose is to harness a collection of individuals and organize them towards a common purpose. And if we don't need the same level of talent to support us in that ambition, I just think it's for people that are really interested in creating stuff. I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. My point exactly with that, Sam, which is that 0 to 10 is all the creativity. That's where all the innovation, the progress, the unknown is. And having a co-founder at that stage can be super invaluable. But at some point that it becomes almost not harmful, but more of a deterrent and a challenge in holding the organization back. Now, to your point around ChatGPT, I'm dealing with a pretty big board decision, and I have two clear paths forward that have been outlined, that it's on the table, and I'm modeling it, and I have all the financial modeling and all of the modeling of this. And I just asked ChatGPT after giving it the information, hey, can you do a SWOT analysis? And it outlined it really clearly. I had a Friday afternoon call with Liz Christo and Jay Poe, partners at Stage 2, and I sent them hey, by the way, here's what this is what I'm thinking through, and here's one path and here's the other path, and goes all the way through. And Liz showed up and she's like, well, I literally, the SWOT analysis was just going to be the feedback that I gave you. You have it 100% right there in front of you. And it is, I don't know, it's pretty crazy to be able to get to the answers feel so quickly. You feel so efficient when you do it. You're like, look at the thing I did. But the reality is, it's just it's sitting right there. It's okay, I can take a breath because I feel like I have all of the information, and I'm being told this is the two paths, and it makes sense and it's clear. So now no longer is weighing on me from a decisional standpoint. Like, it actually helped secure the path forward.
This is such an interesting thing. The speed of the insight is almost, it made me a little uncomfortable. So I spoke about this model I'd used advanced reasoning to build out. This model was something that I was building to counter a decision and an insight that a RevOps and finance team of a $30 billion company had come up with at the C level. And I don't model things. That's not my skill set. And I built this model relatively quickly, and it was really strong. But I was a little nervous. I was like, I just kept sitting with it and thinking, because the speed at which I got to the thing was usually when you're trying to do something that you've never done before or is not within your core skill set, you expect to struggle and sweat to get to the end thing. And there was really no struggle, no sweat. And then after now since then, there have been days where we've all discussed it and gone through it, and it was correct. And I just find it fascinating as to the speed at which you can get the insight and how high quality your own individual output can become if you use this correctly. And at the same time, how to get the alpha out of all of these technologies is not linear right now. Like there are personality differences between the AI. So if you want to use it as a writing assistant, Claude is better. OpenAI is better as more of an analytical tool. If you're looking for, analyst style research, Google Deep Research is better. If you're looking for search, Perplexity is better. You have to play with these things to learn these things and then kind of create your workflow to be able to jump between these things depending on what you're doing. And that's kind of why the competitive advantage is gained by early adopters, because it's not clean and simple and easy. You have to find the advantages, which I think is somewhat interesting.
But I think to your point, Asad, like the marginal difference of using Claude versus ChatGPT to write a LinkedIn post or something is very different than not using it at all.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like certainly it's better to use something. And I think the other thing that's super powerful for artistic sensibility people who don't have hyper-structured thinking is exactly that. Is it the left brain that's create? I don't even know, but whatever other side of the brain is, it's like you can ramble for 10 minutes into your microphone and it will structure it for you. I have been putting off this piece of writing that I needed to do. And then I was like, dude, just pick up your phone and start talking into it. And I did that for 30 seconds and I had the answer in a minute later.
Yeah.
And it is that like hump of like, oh, this is going to take a lot of work that AI will scrub down.
That's the most interesting thing. And you were talking a bit about creativity and organizations. I find that the larger the organization becomes and the more levels you have within an org structure, you get process, you get bureaucracy to drive risk management in essence at scale. But that counters creativity and innovation. And we see that, right? The largest companies find it difficult to be innovative. They essentially transition into distribution machines. And innovation comes from like the smaller company, the more nimble company, where information can flow in these strange lines. Everything's not so structured and linear in these companies. And I think it's really interesting and exciting to see that there will be companies at every stage of revenue that will have less employees, because the less employees you have and the less structure you have inside your organization, the more innovative and creative that organization can really be. And so I think that's something that we're going to notice. The quality of innovation, the quality of creativity coming out of these companies will be higher. And there is some interesting data around this stuff. So a couple of things that stood out. About 50% of startup employees depart a startup within 3 years. Second, engineers made up more of the total hires than in any previous year. They are making up 31% of hires versus 28% in 2020. Go-to-market is flat. That's interesting because they talk about how engineering is becoming so much more efficient, but the hiring is up. ICs make up a lot more of the total hires.
Hold on, Asad, is hiring up or is everything else down? I don't necessarily read that as up. I just meant that as like maybe engineering hiring is flat too. I don't know.
Carta's overall hiring is lower than before. So the number of hires startups are making are lower.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean,
Which
and
makes
as
a
a
lot of sense.
portion of that pie, engineering is up slightly, 3%. So,
Yes. Yeah, that's a good way to read it. The other thing is ICs are making up a lot more of the total hires than before. So 59% of employees at companies under 100 million in valuation are individual contributors. That's up from 51% in 2020. 55% of individuals at companies above 100 million are individual contributors, up from 47% in 2020. Where has this increase gained from? It is manager hiring, which we have discussed before. And I'll tie in something that's happening in large tech right now, which is a few days ago, Meta announced that they are letting go of 5% of their employees. This has nothing to do with efficiency because of the market necessarily. The way they spoke about it was that we are going to rehire that 5%. This is more about performance. Now, every year or every few months, we're going to look at our org, see who is just not right for this company anymore, who's not performing at the levels that we need them to perform at. And we're going to have corrective action at that point. And then we'll rehire better people. And it feels like from an employee base perspective, a lot has now changed over the last 5 years. It would have been really difficult for a company to say this in the public markets just 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, that I'm letting go of 5, 10% of my employees for performance reasons. And now they're very comfortable saying this in the market. They're hiring less managers, they're hiring less people, and they have this higher bar for quality. Some general reflections on this talent trend that we're noticing, as well as, do you think this persists?
This definitely persists, and I
Yeah,
think
right.
we had it on the docket. We're debating whether to talk about it. Paul Graham's essay on the origins of wokeness, and my perspective was I thought the whole point of ending wokeness was that we didn't have to talk about wokeness all the time. But I definitely think that, listen, it's so hard because there's a whole demographic of people. You say what I'm about to say, and you mention the people I'm about to mention, and they just have this visceral negative reaction. But nevertheless, Elon bought Twitter and cut thousand. I think they had 10,000 people. How many people worked there before?
they had 8,000. I think it cut down to 2.
Yeah.
I mean, like 2,000, right? And then, it's the shift in power structure from prognosticators and pundits to doers in some way. Because I just remember the literati, whatever you want to call the tech elite, not even tech, the punditry, the elite punditry, the punditocracy, right? Like all the people on Twitter, like, goodbye, rest in peace, Twitter. It was a beautiful website before, and all of this commentary about how the whole thing was really literally about to end, and it has not ended. It's doing quite well. I think Salesforce is extremely profitable after wave of layoffs. Meta I think Meta's generating cash.
Oof.
So
Churning out cash, especially if TikTok's ban states, all those advertising dollars they lose in the US go to Meta, or at least a big portion of them. Meta will be flying.
I think it's related to that idea of this group of people saying, you know what, the truth of it is, if maybe if Bud Light, maybe there is something to like handling something wrong from a PR perspective, where there's like 50 different substitute products. Like if I don't drink Bud Light, I can drink, I don't know, Corona or Negro Modelo. I think really benefited from people's reaction to Bud Light or Dos Equis. But the point is, I think operators and CEOs they're just, I mean, me, right? Like it's 2 or 3 years ago, you told me that like our glass door was going to get, blown up after some difficult decisions. I would have thought that would impact our performance, but I don't think it's impacted our performance at all. I don't think anybody cares. I think that people are much more willing to make difficult decisions, hard decisions, and less worried about the blowback. I think one of the things that the first Trump presidency taught us, every day he would say something that was totally insane and totally inappropriate, and then nothing would happen. And then you just have to wait for 5 minutes and he would say something else about a totally different subject that was totally insane, totally inappropriate. And you feel like none of those things really they didn't have an impact at all. At some point, it's just the feed, it's just like the vibe, and it has nothing to do with the specific things that you say or the specific details. And I think the point is like people have a lot more confidence. Zuck has a lot more confidence. And, I saw Kara Swisher on Instagram or something like that, saying just really trying to say negative things about him. And what I got from Kara Swisher's rant about how she thinks he's a whatever, and it's a pathetic, and he's really trying to like overcompensate for a lack of masculinity, and all the talk about masculinity is this deep insecurity among all of these people, maybe some of whom were like bullied in high school or whatever, like Zuck or Mark Andreessen, and that and the whole point that I took away was like nobody cares what Kara Swisher thinks.
Yeah.
Not really. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. And the idea that it did matter, she's convinced it matters. Of course, she's convinced that if she says that Mark Zuckerberg's a loser, that means that that's what he is. But what it really felt was like spoiled grapes. Was like she's just jealous. She's just jealous that she doesn't have the power that she once wielded. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm sure Pivot's like getting millions of downloads, but even that doesn't mean that she has any influence over other products. It just means that she's a brand just like everybody else, just like Zuck's a brand. So anyway, my point is that I think companies are much more emboldened to make difficult decisions in the spirit of operating efficiency, and I think we're only going to see these trends continue with AI. And I think that, like I said before, managers are going to have to justify their existence. You're going to have to show me that there's a power, just like with you, Asad, the weekly one-on-one. Like these structures are ripe to be questioned, and sometimes they're going to withstand it, and sometimes it's going to be specific to the individual, and sometimes a weekly one-on-one will be exactly how a company achieves its goals, and sometimes it won't be. But I think that managers, particularly in our ecosystem, are much, much, much less concerned. Well, of course, and the administration's changing, so certainly they have that. They're not watching their rear ends in the same way as during the Biden presidency, but they're just much less concerned about sort of like public backlash. They're just trying to operate and go forward with efficiency. And I guess on the margin, I think that that's probably a good thing. Certainly a good thing for shareholders. I just hope that there's, nice people doing that as much as there's jerks that are doing that.
I care less about the noise itself, but more about what it's represented. And I've thought a little bit about this over the last several weeks. And administration change. There's a lot of optimistic people, especially in the public markets, which is great. That's a really great thing. But the other side of it is, I think this accelerates more. I think more about the transactional nature of how we've become, and just everything that you're saying, Sam, feels super transactional. Oh, TikTok advertisers are moving from this to this. Oh, when Trump says this, it's less about the thing he says, because in the next 5 minutes he's going to have another transactional message. It's so transactional. His meme coin, transactional. Everything is transactional. Literally everything. And that is probably where my heart is in terms of thinking about this, but my brain is as well, of just like, man, is this like, can't we just have genuine connections? Like, I'm actually going to New Orleans because I want to talk to people in person and have a genuine sit down connection and CEO conversation with people.
AJ,
I'm so tired. I am exhausted from just the amount of like BS transactional noise of people hitting me up on LinkedIn or emails or, stuff getting put on my calendar that doesn't feel genuine in any way. It's why I look forward to these conversations. I came into this conversation kind of like you did, Sam, a couple weeks ago, where you're like, we're going to have this. And at the end, we were like, oh, that was a great conversation. Same exact thing. We spend an hour intentionally have these conversations, and I feel refreshed afterwards. I feel exhausted after the after the tweets that are like this, and the constant nature.
I think the counter on that would be that the purpose of businesses is to transact.
Yeah,
and we
you're
got
right.
away from that with all of
100%.
this like virtue signaling, and using morals and morality to push forward initiatives that clearly did not help businesses or help society. And I was looking at this like shift towards masculinity, and we've spoken about this before. That young men are struggling as a community, College enrollment has declined from 62% in 95 to 57%. 1 in 3 young men don't have a romantic partner in the last 3 years. Only 39% of 21-year-olds were employed full-time, down from 64% in 1980. These groups have struggled. It's usually that when you have such a strong stance on a certain moral issue, it doesn't help everyone equally, and it pushes people into corners.
Especially if it's on the fringes. If
But
it's
if
a
we
nuanced
separate this
thing,
from organizations, then it might actually be a net positive, where organizations do what organizations are supposed to do,
100%
which is
agree.
transact and promise.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree
but-
with that. Go ahead, Sam.
No, I mean, I'm playing both
I agree.
sides.
I agree
just-
with it in
go
the.
ahead, AJ.
I agree with it in like that like we were focusing on the wrong things and not in the wrong things, but they were getting an unequal sized voice and opinion on how companies
Very
should
weird.
run.
Yeah.
What?
It had become so weird. DEI had started pushing forward like racism in a weird way. Like, I've given examples that we dealt with on a regular basis, and we lost a lot of business because of this. We did not create a DEI practice. True Search did, and a lot of other companies became DEI recruitment companies, and we lost revenue because of that. And the stuff I was hearing during that period was really weird. Like, it is very uncomfortable where companies felt it was okay to go to a young white kid and tell them that you would have gotten this job based on just your skills, but you're not getting it based on the color of your skin. How is that the solution to a problem? So I think a correction was absolutely necessary. And I kind of feel excited about the correction, if I'm being very straight.
Well, I
Good.
think, the debate is, this is how, this is the, we are a tiny microcosm of the town square, right? Like, this is, you work these ideas out, hopefully in public. That's the beauty of a free society, that even when we have negative reactions to wokeness or DEI, you're allowed to say them. You're not worried that the secret police is going to show up on your doorstep and whisk you away. So that's a beautiful thing. And this is how we work it out. And I think that what we're all longing for, to a certain extent, or at least what as we're talking about this, it's okay to take, what's the word? It's not morality. It's sort of identity politics, maybe. But it's okay to take these cultural issues out of the organization, I think, if there's a culture underpinning it in the first place. And I think that that's the other side that I will advocate for, which is, I get it. Like, I don't think Zuck. I don't think if you create a platform, your response. But I could, this is, and maybe I need to think about what I'm going to say before I say it. But I generally think that, like, I guess I think if bad things happen on a technology, that doesn't mean the technology is at fault. I think that it means that, bad people are going to use technology in bad ways, and good people are going to use it in good ways. But I do think that that's why a culture exists, and that's something that Trump did violate, which is that all of these unspoken things, you don't need to have as many things written down if we can all agree on the right way to behave. And you don't need to talk about, racism or sexism or discrimination in the workplace if we were open and non-racist and accepting, and we created a society that embraced all kinds of people. And the reality is that you only need those things in different structures. They show up in the wrong place if the underpinnings are not firm in the first place. And that's what we've lost a little bit, with the internet. Like, we talk again, I can always have 15 counter arguments to everything I say in my head. But back in the old days, when there's only 3 television stations and no cable news and no Fox News and no internet, and there was CBS, ABC, NBC, and that's it. And those things were the middle way. They incorporated both liberal and conservative perspectives. They celebrated the Reagan presidency as much as they celebrated, the Clinton presidency. And when you fracture everybody into their own tiny little micro community, and when the algorithm is incentivized to enrage you, you get the splintering that happens where you don't feel like a cohesive whole. You don't feel like an American in the same way that we used to. So, but we're well over time. What were you going to say, Asad? I want to
transition it to. I really like what you said, and we'll keep talking about this because this is one of the biggest shifts that's happening in our world. But we are at time, and so we're going to end this today with another interesting question. I've been reflecting on the CEO Summit, which is my favorite event of the year. Very excited to land in New Orleans tomorrow and take part. And one of the themes for the year, in addition to profitable, efficient growth and implementation of AI and go-to-market, is personal and professional development. And so today's question, guys, is what are you doing differently this year to foster professional development, to be able to be oriented the right way to fight this fight this year and next year? AJ, what are you doing?
I'm going to give one thing that's a shout out to Sam here as well. By the way, Asad, every time you bring up I just want to go back to shout outs and
Yeah, he's like, I got a shout out.
I don't care. I give a shout out in the professional development bucket. Something that Sam said 2 weeks ago, which I've been actually implementing and doing. He said, we're in this like watered down back and forth ChatGPT email conversation. And at the end of the day, like, what are we doing when you have these conversations? And I've been much more intentional about just responding myself in my own voice. And I will use ChatGPT to look at it, but also just like saying like, no, these are the words that I'm saying and that I mean. And so from a learning and development standpoint, I think just making sure that I'm not losing my voice into the organization, most importantly to the company, and that it's still clear. So I can use ChatGPT to clear things up, but it's still my words that are being used.
I really like
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that. That goes to you.
That was fantastic. I'll go next. Sam, you can end it for us. I'm going to do something this year that makes me a little uncomfortable, but I'm going to travel a lot more, which is kind of opposite to what AJ is doing this year.
Last week, I said I'm not doing that. It's overrated.
I plan on going and living in California for a few weeks or maybe a few months this year. I have felt that I've read a lot about the Valley and I know a lot of people in the Valley, but there's something there that I've always wanted to feel out, and I've never really done that. And I live a life where I actually have the ability to just get up and go live somewhere for a few weeks or a few months. And so this year, at some point, I'm going to go land up in the Valley and spend a little bit of time there and attend more events and more conferences and hang out with people like you in person a lot more. I think that'll be helpful for personal development. And so that's my shift.
What I'm doing from a personal development perspective and trying to be super intentional about it is I have a tendency to go dark. I think we've talked about this before when a bad piece of news comes up or something I don't like in the business. And so I have been focusing on this practice that I call looking away, which is a way of saying, as I sense the negative feelings coming into me, that typically create a mixture of fear and shame and embarrassment, and then also pessimism, I just intentionally have a voice inside my head that says, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to do that. Everything's objectively fine. Everything's going well. If ARR goes down for a day or two because of cancellations, that's okay. You're profitable. You've built up the cash balance. You're doing great. Everything's great. And doesn't necessarily say that I'm trying to disregard my feelings. And there's certain times when I want to process them, probably with my therapist. But in general, allowing my mind to tell me an arbitrarily different story about my reality simply because of a negative data point is something that tends to cripple me in the past. And so I'm trying to do this practice of just look away. Like, it's good. Everything's good. We're going to be grateful and positive and move forward into the future confidently.
I love that. Very zen.
All right, folks. Well, was this 93?
93.
We are under 2 months away from
100
countdown. 100. And then what happens?
And then we start counting down to 1,000. And we're like 75-year-olds doing this.
Exactly. What happens when my Strava score gets above, 120? Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing really. Keep going.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Give us 5 stars in the stores where you listen to your podcasts, and share what you think is your greatest insight in our Topline Slack channel community or on LinkedIn. We'll make certain to engage.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
This episode was brought to you by AirCall, the business communications intelligence platform.
Deliver a better experience for your customers and your teams at AirCall. That's AIRCALL.io. Save time, save money, and improve performance with a single communications platform.
Thanks for listening to Topline. New episodes come out every Sunday. If you like what you heard today, subscribe so you never miss an episode, leave a 5-star review, and share it with your friends. Don't forget to join our Topline Slack channel to connect with us and discuss the topics we cover with other listeners. Click the link in the show notes. Lastly, if you're interested in joining Pavilion, you can learn more about membership at joinpavilion.com/membership. Thanks again for listening.